Hello and welcome back to the Oh No 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 podcast. Rovers hit the road this Saturday with a trip to whatever they're calling New Douglas Park nowadays, having bizarrely leapfrogged Hamilton Accies after both teams suffered defeats last weekend. I'm your host, Robbie Weir, and as ever, I'm delighted to be joined in these weird therapy sessions that we seem to be having on a regular basis now. My continuing colleague in misery, we've got Scott Fleming. How are you doing, Scott?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, mate. A wee bit better after having to dissect that on Monday night, but that was a tough one to go back over after already having to watch it on the Saturday. But hopefully a bit more positivity and sort of just better football on display this weekend.
Yeah, 100%. I went into work on Tuesday and just full disclosure, there's 6 women in my team and I'm the only guy, only football fan, right? Now, they started talking about hairdryers for a good 5 minutes. Now, this is no misogynistic chat. And I'm just smiling away. I'm like, why are you so happy? Andy Robertson's bullet header, of course. So, yeah, they were... Oh, aye, of course. Forgot the football was on. So that cheered me up no end. Also joined by a returning Alan Douglas Munn. How you doing, Alan?
I am not bad, mate. Not bad. Last weekend wasn't great, but I don't know why. As I've got older, I've got more optimistic. So the further we're going into the week, the closer we get to Saturday, the more I start thinking, right, we're going to turn that around again. Let's get it on. Come on.
Yeah, I think you always get that sort of return of the optimism as you edge towards the end of the week, albeit it's a bit more difficult at the moment, but hopefully we can try and G things up here. And of course, the man of multiple tops, we've got Leslie Maven. How are you doing, Leslie, firstly?
Great. It's still snowing in Sapporo and it's also still snowing in Oban as well. So even if I wanted to go to Hamilton weekend, I wouldn't be able to now. We've got a wee quiz for the listeners today. I'm not going to tell you what's hanging behind me. Suffice to say, it's not an airdrie top. But if you're listening, if you're watching, there's a shirt behind me, and I want you to tell us which Rovers cult hero wore this. It's a little bit sneaky because this player was in the youth setup when they had this. The number on the back might be a bit of a clue, but if you know who this is, just put it in the comments and you'll win some bragging rights.
There you go. He just does this himself. It's not walking on his own. It's not 1993 as well. So if you get the Manic Street Preachers reference, then more power to you. Huge fan myself. So yeah, Alan, Leslie, just I'll start off with yourself, Alan. So obviously you didn't manage to make a long to sort of the podcast that we had on Monday. Just want to get your thoughts on that. I know that you touched on it briefly, but just your sort of thoughts on the last weekend's result and how you're going into this week looking ahead.
Yeah, you know what? It's weird because I think I actually put on Twitter that at half-time that it was the worst half of football I'd seen for Rovers all season. And it genuinely felt that way in the first half. Second half, I thought really, really good. Lewis Gibson just brought something different to the team, a kind of spark that we'd been missing. And yeah, generally thought the second half we were really, really good just to get hit by that ridiculous goal at the end there. And then I watched the highlights and I was like, we had a lot of chances in that first half. And I didn't remember it being that way just because, on the whole, our play was really poor. There wasn't really anyone in the team in that first half that you could say, actually, they've had a decent game. Even guys who are normally Mr. Reliable, like Scott Brown, just it wasn't quite falling for him. It came together a bit in the second half. So, having watched the highlights, I genuinely felt like, you know what, there's still some positives to take from that, in that even playing poorly, we're creating more chances. That obviously takes us back to the biggest problem, and one that you guys kind of covered on Monday night, is that we really need someone to be converting more of these chances. Leslie's done some pretty damning statistics on this in terms of, goal scorers in the last 10 years or so, and it's really, it's just bizarre. We've had different managers, different coaches, different sets of players, and it's just more of the same. It must be our fault somehow as the fans. I don't know how, but it just must be, because we're the only constant in all of this. So we've done something to be cursed. I think that's what it is.
I think we made a Faustian pact when we won the Ramsden's Cup. Probably me up the back of the stand, candle circle and all. So Leslie, just wanted to get your thoughts on things. Do you think it's just as well frustrating? Again, we saw Jack Hamilton goes off injured. We lost Callum Smith earlier in the season, Lewis Vaughan. So again, to go back to Alan's point, so just try to get that consistent run for the forwards. Quite a frustrating thing.
So absolutely, yeah. And thanks, Alan, for the feed line about the stats as well, because that saves me having to lead with complaining about the first half. So I was watching the highlights back, and I was thinking, we were creating a lot of chances. And so I went and had a look at the stats, and Raith Rovers stats had done a bit of work on this on Twitter, and I kind of built out from this. And actually, since the Dunfermline game, since Neill Collins has come in, if you take that Dunfermline game out, we've had more shots than the opposition in every single game. Weirdly enough, the Morton game at Capello is the only game where the opposition has had more shots on target than us. So, if you wanted to look at the bright side, you could say even when Stanton's injured, we're not getting penned in. We're still getting the ball down, we're still getting close enough to the opposition's goal that we're getting shots away and we're getting them on target, but we're not converting them, And sometimes I think like Lewis Jameson at Partick, for example, you just have to say fair play, that's good goalkeeping. Similarly with Morton, there's a couple of times he said, it's good goalkeeping. But, come on. We've got to do better. We have to have the personnel in place to do better. The other thing I will say, though, is at the other end. And that is, generally the opposition are not getting a lot of shots on target. But when they do, they're very often going in. And again, you've got to do better than that. You can't have a situation where, I worked it out, about 40% of shots on target against us end up being goals, which is really not good. So, lots of positives in terms of how the game went, but big question marks for me over the players at both ends of the pitch, and we can maybe come back to that later. And also, yes, in between the first and second goals, that was the most disappointed I've been by a performance from a Rovers team for a good 18 months, and I do not want to see that again. I can take disorganisation with hard effort, I can take bad luck, but that sort of level of disengagement was just atrocious.
Hard-hitting words from Mr. Maben up in Oban there. You've been given your warning, lads.
Join us.
Scott, just on a bit of a lighter note, video that came out today on the social media from the Rovers, Lewis Vaughan back doing recovery work. So maybe I'm just grasping at straws here. How good was that to see?
Aye, well, obviously when you see somebody that's such a sort of club hero and Vaughan being so unlucky with injuries and out quite a lot of the time, you're always curious to how he's getting on. And so when you see him back on the sort of Astro, I mean, you could see he's only in his own trainers and stuff like that. So he was obviously just doing very light stuff, but it means that he's clearly making good progress, that he's even out there sort of being, not with obviously with the main training, but he's out around the same time with the physio and stuff like that. So he's clearly on track, or at least getting some sort of progress, which is good. I'm now at the point with Vaughan, anytime he does get these sort of injuries that are sort of longer term ones, that you're like, you just now never want to rush him, because you know that it could then end up being another 6 months or another season that you lose him for. So you're always really just wanting him to come through it and have very little setbacks, but also just let's not push him too hard, because I think there was definitely one of his ACLs anyway that he wasn't back for long, and I think there was rumours that he had been kind of pushed towards coming back a little bit earlier, and he then ended up doing another one of his ACLs. So you're just like, well, is that something to do with it? So when it comes to stuff like this, I do fear that you just don't want to push him too early, too quickly, and try and get him back. I know that we're struggling for goals and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, you would rather have him 2 weeks after instead of pushing him 2 weeks earlier and potentially losing him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, one thing you've got to say is you cannot give him enough praise for his attitude. Yeah. The way he just keeps going and keeps going. I mean, without having any specific examples, I'm going pretty much just on kind of general assumptions here. There'll be guys who have had less injury problems than him who've just sacked it and went, nah, I can't do this anymore. I have to accept my career's over and just move on. And it'd been really easy for him to do that. Well, not easy is not the right word, but it would have been probably easier than what he's done to kind of push through. So to keep going the way he has and to keep coming back as strongly as he does, my God, if anyone deserves a break, it's that guy. He really does. He just deserves, and like the last 5, 6, 7 years of his career, whatever it is, with no injuries, just give him a run at it.
I think it really comes back to Scott's point about the management of it all. But yeah, just to touch on what you're saying there, probably a good example of it's Grant Savoury at Queen's Park, who he was meant to be back in the summer, but he's just had these continual setbacks with this sort of thing. And again, it's not anything that Queen's Park are potentially doing. It's just that, unfortunately, just people forget how hard it is to come back from these injuries. And it's not a cakewalk. It's not a procession of just like 12 months and you're back, no issues. Like, there can be complications with it. So, yeah. But fully agreed with Alan. I think that, I don't think anyone's ever going to be in short praise for Lewis Vaughan and his attitude in terms of coming back and the sort of commitment that he's got for the cause and what he does. So just to look ahead to Saturday, Leslie, relatively big question this one, but do you think we're at a defining point in our season now?
I think we absolutely are. And I think if last week's result wasn't a kick up the backside, this week's has to be. For right now, we can forget about what Ayr are doing in Queen's Park and Partick maybe further up the table. We are in the position that we are with the points total that we have for a reason. And teams like Hamilton, Morton, these are the teams we are in a battle with to avoid 9th place. And until we get a bit of clear air between us and them, that's the only thing that matters. If we lose to Hamilton and results go the wrong way elsewhere, we're back down into a very close to the relegation playoff spot. So I think this has to be a recognition that, yes, ultimately we might be able to turn it around over the course of the season. It's far too early to say that the season is done, but we do need to start putting points on the board, and we do need to start putting some clear air back between us and between the teams below us. And we absolutely cannot think that we are somehow better than these teams. We've got similar points tallies to them for a reason. We're down there with Hamilton, with Morton, with Dunfermline for a reason. And it's absolutely vital that we get something out of the game on Saturday. It is actually a relegation 6-pointer, I would argue.
I think that a lot of fair comments to unpack there, Leslie. I would agree with you that I think that the main priority just for now has just got to be that sort of looking ahead to Saturday, see where we're at after that, because the permutations of it could be absolutely crazy in terms of if we win it, we're not only going ahead of Accies, the other teams around us, they're tending to play teams at the top of the league. But then also on the other side of it, we could end up in second bottom. So it's just a really bizarre position going in. Alan, just for you, just Rovers actually, looking back at their track record, they've actually got a decent track record at New Douglas Park in recent years. They've not actually lost there since March 2014. But do you think that's a bit of an irrelevant record given our away record this season?
I think it is. It's irrelevant in the sense that it has no bearing on it really. I know as football fans we like to look at these things and it always used to kind of get us nervous playing Cali, for example, before last year because we just couldn't beat them, and there was no reason for it. It was, it's all a nonsense. But these things get in our head. We like to think they don't get in the players' heads, but they'll be aware of the record as much as anyone. But I think ultimately, kind of expanding on what Leslie says, we can't be thinking about who's above us. I'd argue we shouldn't even be thinking about who's below us. We can do that as fans. That what the players need to be doing is that old football cliche: don't look any further ahead than the game that's in front of you. Take every game one at a time. Concentrate on getting the 3 points on Saturday, and whatever else happens, we've got no control over it anyway. So just take care of that and don't worry. And you know what? I have no doubt that's what Neill Collins has said to the guys as well, and that's what they'll be doing. But yeah, we do have a good record there. It's a place I've enjoyed if you can really enjoy visiting Hamilton. I say enjoy it because it's a nice, easier wee trip for me as someone who drives to away games. You know, there's plenty of parking. It's easy to get to. It's not a wholly unpleasant stand to watch football from. Kind of being that little bit raised up as well. You know, every seat in it's got a good view. It's all right. It's fairly soulless, like most new build stadiums are, but it's fine.
My unending memory of being in Hamilton's away section is the sort of containers at the far end. This was the game that Ben Williamson scored the double against them and sent one of their fans absolutely tonto by celebrating in front of their fans. There's a guy just not long had COVID, but he's standing on the top of a container at the end of the Sainsbury's end watching the game, and it was just a bit strange. But aye. Yeah, so Scott, just for yourself, Accies, obviously they had a bit of a torrid time last weekend. Touched on it at the top of the show. We leapfrogged them despite both teams losing because of the goal difference when they shipped 5 to Thistle. Do you think they'll maybe potentially make a change because they had Charlie Albinson in goals? Do you think that Dean Linus might come in, or just what would be your thoughts on that in terms of their sort of situation after shipping those goals, given that it's an ex-Rovers player in Linus as well? Do you think that's all set up for him to be making wonder saves left, right and centre, as they tend to do?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little bit surprised that they did get so comfortably beaten at Partick last weekend. I mean, I think Hamilton, like, of past seasons anyway, were always kind of prone to a result like that, where they would throw in a right stinker and get cuffed off of somebody, especially away from home. But I think this season they've kind of surprised everyone a wee bit, because they signed a couple of decent players in the summer where I thought, oh, that's a handy sort of championship player that I didn't think they would get, considering they've just been promoted at the playoffs as well. But they've also got a few players where I'm thinking that's where you need to be targeting in terms of, like, I've seen some nonsense about, I think it must have been a Hamilton fan saying that it was about who's the best sort of centre-halves in the championship, and folk were putting Sean McGinty in there, and I was just like, well, clearly they didn't watch football, because that's just no him at all. But in terms of the goalies, they've beat. I think John Rankin's kind of chopped and changed. I don't know if it's due to injuries or what, because I don't obviously watch them week in, week out. But Albinson and Linus have kind of had, I don't know if it's quite an even split, but they've both had their fair share of minutes this season. So I think there's always the question whether they go and change it to kind of wake the players up a little bit more, kind of reset. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I've never really rated Linus as a goalie. I mean, we had him briefly on a sort of loan spell, or did we sign him as a free agent? I can't remember, but he came after being at St Mirren, and I think we thought he was going to be decent, just the fact that he came for St Mirren, and he really wasn't. But he played in the game that we've already played them this season. I think he's played both the games, actually. We've played them. We played them in the League Cup at home when it kind of didn't mean anything. And then we played them, obviously, in the 3-3, and I think he's played both of them. So I think, in terms of that, I'm not really that bothered who's in goals. We just need to be focused on what we do in terms of actually taking our chances this weekend, because I think Hamilton are a sort of team that this season especially, they've been showing that whilst they're conceding goals, they're scoring goals. So they're losing games 3-2 quite often, and 4-2s and stuff like that. Yes, they only scored one last weekend, but yeah, they've got, I think, is Sean the top scorer in the league for Hamilton?
I'll go and have a wee look.
I'm pretty sure if he's not, he's definitely in the top 2 anyway. But so they've got somebody like him who's been very good in the championship before with likes of Kelly. So we know they've got firepower up front. So we definitely, I think we're going to have to score a couple to win this game on Saturday, because I fancy them to score.
Yeah, I was. That was going to actually be my next point, Leslie. Just Ollie Shaw seems to be the main threat. Scott, you're absolutely spot on. He is top scorer in the league with 7 goals. Brian Graham just behind him on the 6. Ollie Shaw, obviously, we've seen him a few times this season, seemed a bit of a surprise addition for Hamilton. But yeah, do you think that we can be reasonably comfortable in terms of what to expect from them, given this is the third time that we've met and we've seen them a few times before?
I mean, it certainly helps knowing who we're coming up against. I think the one thing I would say is that it's not just Ollie Shaw, though. They've got actually a plethora of good striking options, and Connor Smith is having a good start to the season. Somebody's probably going to tell me he's injured now that I've said that. He's had a decent start to the season as well. Todorov is always a threat against us. So, there's a number of players who are capable of getting goals for them, as we saw in the 3-0 game. But always when you've got somebody of Ollie Shaw's quality, that is going to give you the edge. And it goes back to the stats that I was reeling off as well about the number of shots we get on target that aren't going in. If you've got somebody that's just got that little bit of quality to turn a good chance or whatever they get in the box into a goal, then that's absolutely going to help you. And I did see a mad stat a couple of weeks ago, and I might have got this wrong, but something like Hamilton were in one of the top 5 teams in Scotland for goals scored, or something crazy along those lines. They've certainly been, fair play to them, they've certainly been scoring plenty of goals, so I agree with Scott that we will need a few goals, I think, if we're going to have a chance of beating them.
Yeah, they're third top in the division at the moment because Falkirk have scored 27, and then you've got Ayr 22, and then Livingston and Hamilton are joint third with 19 apiece. Another player, funnily enough, looking back at the records, I mentioned to you before, Alan, was a player that always scored against us, who did score in that 3-2 loss. The last time we lost there was James Keating. But maybe joining him in the pantheon of players that are annoyingly good at scoring against Raith Rovers is Kevin O'Hara, man who seems to always crop up against us. Just your thoughts on him, Alan, and just
he's one
another
of those
threat to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, he's one of those annoying guys that you kind of, you're thinking when Hamilton make a step up, it's like, right, is this one time too many for him to have a go at the Championship? He's been there, he's never quite really got going at that level. He's had the occasional decent season, but he looks, every time they come up, you think, right, that's it, he's done now. But then he comes up against us and just like scoring against us. And it's bizarre because I still don't know how we conceded 3 goals to Hamilton in that league game. Obviously, a dodgy penalty and dodgy defending is the answer, but for 70 minutes of that game, it's probably the best we've played all season. And kind of from my point of view, if we can just find some of that again, then they've shown at the back that they can be got at. I mean, you were talking earlier on about Linus and McGinty. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did they not combine for our goal in the League Cup with some fairly comical defending?
Lee Kildare.
It was Lee Kildare,
was it? Yeah. But we've shown there in that game, in the 3-3 game, that there's definitely weaknesses at the back that we can exploit. And I think, again, it comes down to, without wanting to sound like a football manager, we need to try and not worry too much about them and what they can do to us, and just concentrate on doing what we can do. Because if our good players turn up and play to their ability on the day, we've got every chance of coming away with a good result. I'm not going to get too confident because obviously I'm still washing the egg off my face from last Thursday with my bold 4-0 prediction. But
I wouldn't worry too much about it. Morton fans are wet wipes. So Blair was worse with his 5-9 anyway, so it's all good.
Yeah, but I've just noticed Kevin O'Hara must like scoring in a 5-1 defeat because he scored last week for Hamilton and obviously scored the goal for Dunfermline in the famous 5-1 COVID win that we had over the past.
Can we just spend 5 minutes talking about that just to break the podcast up for a wee bit? What a game that was, by the way, honestly. And just classic COVID ball.
It's just awful that there was nobody there, isn't it? I mean, imagine that game in a packed Starks Park. It would have been incredible. It was great on the telly.
The one good thing about COVID, though, is at 5-1, you got Jamie McDonald going, fucking yes! into an empty stadium, and then they do the thing. Well, we apologise if you heard any strong and offensive language there that you did find offensive. We are very sorry.
It does also make me think he's not really getting a game for Tranmere just now. So come on, Andy Barrowman, bring him home.
Bring him back.
Imagine Regan Hendry in that midfield with Brown. Oh,
Can you imagine a
especially if you get Sam
midfield?
Stanton back in there as well. Oh my goodness.
I'd be getting giddy with excitement if it was Hendry, Brown, Stanton, Easton, Byrne. Aye. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here. That's getting into fantasy football territory. Yes, Leslie, it was mentioned before, obviously, Accies, they've actually got the second highest conceded in the league with 25. So do you think, it's mentioned, Alan's sort of saying there, just an opportunity to focus on Rovers, and I know that we've put 3 past them already this season, but a good opportunity there to potentially make a statement, put in a bit of a mark. I know that it's been an issue that you've highlighted even before on this podcast tonight, just sort of saying about a lack of goals. Hopeful going into this one?
Just win. Just win. I don't care if it's 1-0, just win. What I will say, though, just to kind of be a bit more kind of expansive, is I was really impressed with Cody David when he came on. I think I saw that and I was watching him and I was thinking, hang on. I mean, I don't think he's going to go and score 15 goals or something, but I was thinking there's actually maybe more there than some of us gave him credit for. And he was getting up for things. He's strong as an ox. He was pissing off defenders. He was getting a few shots away. I mean, granted, he needs to learn to go up for the ball without fouling. I mean, there's a bit of fouling and a bit of strength is good, but if we can cut that out, I think he could actually be a handy option for us. He's got some of the right tools there, and I think there's something there where, by God, we're going to need it. But no, if we just get the win, that'd be good. I do think, though, and the goalkeeping point's an important one. Again, this is probably going to come back and bite me on the bum. We've done really well in the last few games. Lewis Jameson in particular, if you take that first half effort out, he's had some really good chances in the last few games, so he's been denied by the goalkeeper. And I'm not sure that Hamilton's keepers are going to give you the same stern test. So hopefully if we can just keep up out shooting teams, then we might get something from that. And as I say, the one bright spot for me is I know that the stats when Stanton and Vaughan don't start are atrocious. But, like I say, we're still creating chances. Hopefully we can make a few of those stick at the weekend.
Yeah, a few points there to sort of discuss. Cody David, of course, being an ex-Accies player. So there's that aspect that brings it to the table as well. He's got every motivation to go out there and make a bit of a statement.
You put us in that position, and a guy who was at us on loan a few years ago and was hopeless, and then comes back to play against us for another team, he's scoring a hat-trick.
Well, if he wants to go
I'm not suggesting Cody David scoring a hat-trick on Saturday. I'm saying if it was us and it was one of our former loan players, that's what happened.
Non Rovers, he'd do a Adebayor and then get sent off as the goal was offside or something like that.
Like the Morton player did last week.
Well, we'll move past that one. I've had a bit enough about that Morton game. So just for you, Alan, just want to get your impressions of Cody David last week. I know obviously you didn't make it on the post-match.
Yeah, it's interesting because against Livingston, it looked like there was something there. Then I started noticing how he warmed up, and we've discussed it in our group chat. He doesn't put an awful lot of effort into his warm-up, but it doesn't seem to affect him when he comes on. Thistlery didn't really get much of a chance, and there's only that one kind of thing that stood out when he basically had a fight with Lee Ashcroft. But on Saturday, I thought he looked really decent. He looked strong. He was putting some good challenges in, won a couple of decent headers, and was actually able to kind of direct them to Mullen, I think it was at one point. A really good header down into the channel for him to run onto. Looks pretty strong on the ball in terms of brushing past defenders and being able to get a shot away. I think there's something there. This guy's been at some good clubs at a decent level, at a higher level than we're at. And you listen to some of the comments from some of their fans, and it's mostly frustration because they've seen that there's something there. You just don't always get it from them.
Yeah.
And sometimes guys like that, it continues. Other times they just find the right place and the right manager who can just get something from them. And my eternal optimist is going to come out again and say maybe Neill Collins can be that manager.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to remember, I know Duncan mentioned it before on a previous podcast, that he was only about like 18 or 17 or 18 or something when he was playing for Accies. So you've got to give him the benefit of being young at that point, and you don't really know. And again, as John Hughes can attest, to throw back to my favourite man, it's, it might be one of those players that's just not a great trainer, but then does the job on the pitch for you. So, yeah.
I don't care how he trains if he scores goals.
Yeah, well, see if it's a decision that Neill Collins will need to make going into Saturday. Scott, just to focus again more on the Rovers side of things, but to take it back to the back of the pitch, do you think it's at a point where Neill Collins is maybe just going to be hitting that to go to the football manager parlance of clear squad and just clear the decks? Nobody's safe for their starting spot given the performance last week, or what would you have in mind for looking ahead to Saturday in terms of the defence?
Yeah, I think this weekend's probably, for the first time in a few weeks anyway, one of the more interesting sort of team selections defensively, in terms of just how we lost 3 goals on 5 shots or something it was on goal or something. It was something silly like that. So
that's right.
And the fact that we were so soft at the goals as well. Again, set pieces, we were let down by that, and it was kind of, there was a lot to be said about the defending for the goal. So I don't think you could go into this game with the same back four. I would be shocked if it was the same back four. I think obviously everybody was kind of pointing fingers saying, oh, that's Liam Dick, he can't play in a back four on the left side, he can't play Hanlon on the right side. As I said on Monday night, the fact that they two played fine at Partick the week before when we changed it to a back four, yes, they clearly just didn't have a great game on Saturday, but I don't think it was just meaning that they can't ever play together again in a back four. Mm-hmm. I do think that it might be a time to bring back Ewan Murray again. I think he's kind of sat some time out since he's sending off at Dunfermline. He sat his suspension out, and then he's had to be patient on the bench. And I mean, that was on Saturday, the first time we've seen him since that Dunfermline game, I'm sure. So yeah, I mean, I think Callum Fordyce is also going to be trying to push back into the manager's thoughts, but he also, last time we seen him, he obviously wasn't great in the first half against Partick. So yeah, I think Collins has got quite a big call with the defence this week. I thought Darbo, actually, it was probably his poorest game also for us since he signed. I thought he was pretty poor for 2 of the goals, definitely. So I'd like to, I'd imagine Darbo will probably start, just the fact that he's been fairly consistent since he's been here, and the fact that I think the manager, he's the one that brought him in. So I think he's sort of his man, to put it that way. So, yeah, yeah, that's basically how I'd put it. I think it'll be interesting 2:00 Saturday to see. Obviously, we talk about formations and stuff, but just in general, who's in defence, because I do think we could see a different centre back pairing for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you could even extend that to Kev at the back. I mean, you could look in terms of all manner of changes, and I don't think it's too harsh to sort of say that there's no position that's really safe based off last week. Again, you don't have to look too far back to say that against Partick, I mean, maybe did in the first half, you could argue that we rode our luck, but then still to leave for Hill only the 1 goal conceded. It's not really a bad thing, pick up a point at a difficult place. Yeah, what would be your thoughts about it, Leslie, just in terms of the defensive situation?
When I was a student, I had a championship manager save. And we were 3-0 up against Kilmarnock in the 82nd minute. We lost 4-3. And I removed the back four and the goalkeeper completely from the squad, fined them 2 weeks' wages and publicly censured them and caused a meltdown. So I'm not going to suggest Neill Collins does that. Don't change everybody, including the goalkeeper. It doesn't work well. But I think, yeah, I would be very surprised if we see the same defensive pairing. I think we will stick with Kevin goals. I just think putting Andy McNeil in, I've said it before, putting Andy McNeil in against a team that have actually been scoring a lot of goals, it isn't fair on him, let alone anybody else. I had wondered if Dabo might be either dropped or moved up the park. That's another option. But again, you're then bringing somebody in who's not played a lot of football. So I suspect Dabo will probably stay at right back purely because you're then bringing in somebody who doesn't have the match sharpness. Stevenson, I suspect, would stay at left back, and I think it'll be the centre back pairing where we see some changes. And again, I suspect it will be Fordyce coming back in for Hanlon, probably for his organisational ability rather than necessarily a technical ability. We do need somebody getting everybody organised and screaming blue murder at people and things like that. And I suspect Fordyce might be the person to do that. So having said all that, the only change I do think is, having gone through that whole spiel, the only change I think we'll see is Fordyce coming in for Dick. But I think I agree completely. There's nobody, including Hanlon and Stevenson, nobody is immune from being dropped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just to come to yourself, Alan, do you think it's a good opportunity for the players really to take a bit of a spotlight? I know that would sort of, a lot of the stats that have been bandied about online, Raith stats ever does stellar work in terms of the stuff that they put out there. A lot of it can be quite hard hitting and to the point. But it's worth a discussion. I mean, do you think it's an opportunity for players to maybe come in and take a bit of a spotlight, given the sort of impact that Stanton and Vaughan, they're not, well, we don't know about Stanton, but Vaughan's certainly not going to be coming in for this one, but it's really an opportunity to come in and make a mark.
And I think the most obvious player, and there'll be like people will be sitting there at 1 minute to 2 on Saturday, already kind of thinking of the wording of their rage tweets if this doesn't happen. Is the guy who's absolutely put his hand up and says, "Right, it's my turn," is Lewis Gibson. Now, we have to caveat with the fact that he's still a young guy. He's got limited experience at this level, but he's shown enough in the 2 games that he's come off the bench recently to say that he's made a difference in both games. Absolutely, the game, we were so much better in the second half last week because he just links up so well with Easton and Stevenson down that left-hand side. We've seen it a number of times this season, and they just seem to have a really good understanding. And I think we just look, at the moment, we look more of a threat with Gibson on there. So he's the obvious one, I think, that has put his hand up. And you could probably make a case for Cody David as well.
Yeah.
Kind of following on from what we said earlier. We don't know how Jack Hamilton is. Obviously he's taken a really bad one last week. There's doesn't seem to be any suggestion that he's got concussion and therefore having to sit out because of kind of protocols. But I think he's probably still a bit sore, you would imagine. So I don't know that I'd necessarily be looking to kind of risk him going in, because he's not someone who'll hold back. He'll be he's the forward equivalent of Ewan Murray. He'll stick his head in there and take one in the dish. And guys like McGinty will happily give him one. So I don't know that I'd necessarily put him in. So I think Cody David's another one who we might see starting for the first time.
Yeah, it's a huge decision there to make for Neill Collins just going into this one. I mean, I know that he'd sort of spoken about how in the press that sort of Stevenson and Hamilton have both had treatment, but they're sort of should be looking ahead to this one, and ideally you're playing them. But again, it's really about managing your squad and sort of making sure that players aren't put in positions where they are compromised, because nobody needs a player missing for weeks on end, basically. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough one to gauge. Let's take things in a bit of a different route now. So I just want to ask you guys, just obviously this week's opposition, Hamilton Accies, what would be your best memories in a game against Accies? Scott, have you got any that jump out to mind from the old archives of playing Hamilton in terms of any games that stand out in particular for you?
to be honest, like there's been a lot of games that's been like quite high scoring with Hamilton, but they're a team that I feel like Morton's kind of the same. They're a team that I don't remember loads of memorable games, but like some of them are actually no for
Some
good
for the
reason.
wrong reason.
Aye, I was going to say, what about the first 70 minutes against Hamilton when we went 4-0 up, and forget the other 20 basically, because we were looking like a team that was going to be unstoppable for 70 minutes. But I'm trying to remember. Again, this is what I'm telling you. I don't have loads of memories with them, but was it no Hamilton that Brian Graham and Baird were at each other in the first half, first half, because one of them wasn't passing them the ball and vice versa, and then they were going after each other down the tunnel, and then one of them scored in the second half, and then they were best mates ever since. I'm sure Bairdy says that in an interview as well with Raith TV at one point, and so. Aye, I mean they two obviously went on to have great careers in the Scottish lower leagues anyway, and obviously with us. But I think other than that, I couldn't really tell you like one single moment or a favourite game for it, because as I say, they seem to be high scoring, but I don't really remember loads from them.
That's fair. I mean, I think that Leslie got very animated very quickly when I mentioned games against Accies. What for you standing out, Les?
So it's a game I didn't even actually see, and it's a game where there weren't even any goals scored. So at the end of the 1994 to 95 season, when we won promotion back to the top league, it was the last day of the season, and we had Hamilton, and I can't remember who our opposition had, but there was a number of permutations. It wasn't quite kind of a helicopter day, but the story was that the championship trophy was in the boot of an Audi in the Kincardine Bridge. And I saw the paper, the fixtures in the morning, and I says, "Oh, this is going to be fine. Hamilton are easy." And then my dad picked up the tea cosy off the table, put the tea cosy on my head, flattened the tea cosy down on my head, and said, "Don't say that." And I then went out and played football with my pals in the park, and I came back and found that we had indeed won the league again, a game against Hamilton. So, yeah, that was my favourite Hamilton memory. And like Scott said as well, a couple of seasons ago, that was great, wasn't it? It was 4-0 up, and then we all just went home and had a nice time.
A great day out. And Alan, for you, you're nodding along there.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the game Leslie mentions the obvious one. It's the one as someone else who's old enough to remember the game. Not old enough to have been allowed to travel for Glenrothes to Glasgow on my own to go to it, as a probably still 14 at the time. I had been at Starks Park the weekend before when we were hoping to beat Dunfermline to win the league, with a absolutely packed Starks Park with a fairly drab 0-0. But I remember being glued to Radio Scotland the following week, kind of trying to listen for the results coming in, and just being absolutely kind of racked with nerves, kind of thinking of, because it wasn't a classic, it's not like we were all over them, hammering down the door, it was Rovers don't do things the easy way, we never have and never will. So that's certainly the most memorable for good reasons. There's plenty of memorable for bad reasons, with probably the worst one for me being the Challenge Cup final a couple of years ago when it was just awful.
Nightmare.
Just awful.
It was very frustrating, that game, because we absolutely pelted them for the full second half and just nothing would go in. It was so frustrating. I just remember being outside the ground and folk are like singing about Rovers having a party, and I was just like, I just knew at that point, I was like, it's just not got a good feeling about this now.
As soon as it got into the whole slagging them off for crowds, that's never a good start when you start slagging off.
I said much the same. I actually said much the same last week. I met Harry Davies outside the ground, and I was like, Morton don't have a right back today. Like, they're playing, I don't know who they're playing. They're probably Cammy Blues or Grant Gillespie. And lo and behold, as it turned out, when you find that sort of stuff out, you're just a bit like, the Charlie Cowie vibes are coming in strong. So yeah, the one that I was actually thinking about just earlier on, just before we came on, I just got to change up the conversation a bit, because I feel like with pre-match podcasts, a lot of the time you're talking about a lot of the same stuff. Was the game in I think it must have been Grant Murray or John McGlynn towards the end of the season where we were playing them, and it was the week or two after Damien Castelnuovo scored against Ayr, and he scored an absolute ridiculous lob from the sort of railway stand edge of the box. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was a sheer dink over the goalkeeper at the time, who was just left in a crumpled heap. And that was, that was just a really fun season to be watching Rovers at the end, just when we had the likes of Brian Graham, still had John Baird, Castelnuovo, very surreal in that I felt like we pushed the boat out a wee bit at the end of the season to sort of bring in a few players just to get us to safety. Anyway, back to Saturday, and I'll take your lineups from you. So, Scott, how would you go for this one?
Yeah, as I said, like Ellen, I think I can actually see a few changes happening just purely down to the fact that how poorly it all went for especially the first 45 minutes. But I think the fact that we leaked 3 goals at home again, we didn't look great at all. Anytime really Morton did get into our box, we looked kind of almost like conceding most of the time they were in our box. Not that they were there much, but I think the team that I would go with, not the team that I think that Collins would go with, but the team I will go is a back four of Dabo. As I said earlier, I would actually bring Ewan Murray back in. Just, I think, as I said earlier, I think he's served his sort of time out of the team now. I would like to see him given a chance again. And we know that he can be very reliable for us anyway. And he's a pretty decent championship defender. I've got Hanlon and Stevenson as well on that sort of left side of the defence. Obviously, Kevin goals as well. Then I've got Brown and Byrne as the sort of two in midfield. Now, I've gone very direct with my 3 sort of that are the attacking 3 in midfield, if you're calling it. And so I've just gone with the young guns out wide with Finlay Pollock on the right and Lewis Gibson on the left, with Dylan in the middle, and basically just saying to Dylan, you go wherever you want, and these 2 are going to run the fullbacks ragged, and you just feed balls out wide to them, basically, to get the ball into the box. And I've gone with Jameson up front purely so that he's not playing out wide. But also, I still think I would like to see another sort of 30, 35 minutes out of David before I give him a start. I thought he was more impressive than I was expecting last week, but I still think that whilst Jameson, as I said on Monday, I think Jameson needs chances, like a few chances to score a goal. He tends to get these chances though, so I think I would like to go with somebody like him who's a bit more technical. I think David's actually probably the striker that Hamilton would prefer to play, because he will fight McGinty, and that's what he wants. And McGowan, I don't think's quite as physical, but I think it's more the fact that Jameson's more technical, and the 2 of them I don't think are overly technical players. So if we can get the ball down and play around them, I think that would be our more likely way to score goals, I think, against them on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that you look back to the game at Starks, and Finlay Pollock in particular in that first half had a really, really solid performance. Like, he came on and just looked really, really assured in his debut, got a goal that he took really well. I think it was a good point that you make as well about Paul Hanlon, keeping him on the left side of defence, because I don't feel like we've done that often enough. I feel like he's often been put onto the right, and it's just, you do just feel like he might be just a bit stronger if we get him into that far side. Alan, what would you have in terms of your lineup for Saturday?
Not too much different. I mean, I would go with Kevin goals. I'm becoming more sympathetic and understanding of the people who are kind of calling for him to be dropped. I don't, and it's not the right reason to not drop someone if they're playing badly, but I don't know how he would react to it. If he would go away and work his ass off to get back in and come back better, I'd think, you know what, maybe give it a go. But then the same token, you then have to give McNeill the same chance you've given him. So you can't just drop McNeill if he has one bad game. But I would stick with Kev anyway, so that's by the by. I'd stick with Darbo at right back. I think something that, for the reasons that were mentioned earlier, but also ultimately this guy's only under contract for another 4 or 5 weeks. If we're wanting to convince him to stay with us, he needs to feel like he is he's not guaranteed a start, because nobody should ever be guaranteed a start. But he needs to feel like he is our first choice right back, unless he's having an absolute mare. And he wasn't great last week, but I don't think he was bad enough to be dropped. So I'd go with that. Stevenson left back, and same as Scott, I'd go with Murray and Hanlon in the middle. I think it was just so obvious in that first half on Saturday how uncomfortable Hanlon is with the ball at his right foot. Sorry, it was just really obvious. So I'd go with that. Brown and Byrne in the base. I'd go with the same three as well. The just that kind of attacking impetus is really important, and Pollock and Gibson will run at the defence all day, and if we can get balls coming in, then brilliant. I'm genuinely 50-50 on up front. I don't think it'll be Hamilton. I'd like to see David, but I think he'll go with Jameson. And he's looked better up front than he has out wide. I think he was completely lost out there. We missed a big opportunity to have a right go at Grant Gillespie at right back last week because we were playing a guy at left wing who's not a left winger. He doesn't look comfortable out there. And part of the issue as well is when he did then move into the middle, he kept drifting out wide again anyway. I think I actually shouted at one point, "Who do you think you are, Jamie Gullen?" And maybe having Pollock and Gibson out there who are going to be occupying those wide areas and getting balls in, that'll help keep Jameson in the middle where we want him. What he's shown so far is he's not exactly someone who's composed with the ball at his feet, say on the penalty spot, in terms of getting a shot away, because that last week was just horrific. But you put a good ball across, he'll get in a position to get it, and he's shown he's got a decent kind of first touch finish, which is, let's fire in there and give him a chance. And you've got David and probably Hamilton to come off the bench to kind of change it up later.
Yeah.
That was a very long-winded way of saying I'd basically have one player different. Actually, no, I'm going with the same team as Scott. I could have just played the same 11.
This is what you're getting when you listen to the Oh No podcast.
Let's face it, we're not on this podcast because we don't like talking about Rovers, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And then, Leslie, just for you, what would be your choice for lineup?
Well, I do find it quite interesting that we're all kind of working on the assumption that Sam Stanton isn't available. I might have missed something in the pre-match because I was really not well at the weekend and I was taking a lot of painkillers, so I might have missed something. But it's interesting that now, when he's out with a training ground injury, we're all automatically assuming that that's him for 4 or 5 weeks, which I think will happen. So, again, I'm probably going to go with that almost an identical lineup. So, Kev in goals, Darbo right back, Stevenson left back, Hanlon and Fordyce in the centre, Brown and Byrne at the base of the midfield, Pollock on the right, Easton in the sort of 10 role, Gibson on the left, and I think we'll have Cody David up top. Because I think I would like to see Lewis Jameson play, but I'm just worried that he'll just spend the whole game getting knocked over by McGinty, and which one of Kildare and McGowan start. I think they'll just knock him over like a bowling pin. Are we doing score predictions as well? Because I've prepared a prop, because I had no idea what to expect tonight. So in this box, we've got 30-minute segments of the game with different types of performance that we're going to get, because you don't know what's going to happen. So let's just take a few of these out. So what have we got here? So our first 30 minutes it says shite bag performance, concede 2 goals. So after 30 minutes, we're going to be 2 goals down. What else have we got in here?
It's just the highlights of last Saturday.
Yeah, it is. So then the next 30 minutes is hard work but no product, 0-0. And then for our last 30 minutes, we're getting shite bag performance 2-0. So according to this, we're going to lose 4-0, which So just to be clear, by the way, in case anybody thinks I'm being a negative Nelly, we've also got dominance 2-0. We've got lots of chances, get 1 penalty 1-0. We've got lots of all of these ones, but what I've ended up picking out is 2 poor halves and some hard work and a 4-0 defeat, which I don't think is going to happen. Even I'm not that negative.
So,
Just wait for Leslie's predictions on the game, though, and it will be a Hamilton win.
Aye. We'll need to, and funnily enough, the predictions have just got out. Blair's been updating that this evening, so make sure to get those updated. Thank you for that, Leslie. I'm not quite sure what to make of that.
Anyone who's listening, really check out the video there, just for mine, Robbie, and Scott's reaction to that whole segment.
Yeah, I'm quite taken aback by that, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it simple with a 2-0 Rovers win. But to go back to lineups just for myself, I would have Kev starting in goals. I would have Stevenson, Hanlon. I would actually bring in Fordyce and Fanky for the back line for this one. Sean Burns sort of sitting deep with Brown just doing his usual sort of motor performance in midfield. I think if Stanton's back, I would have him in, but failing that, I would have Dylan Easton as a number 10, and then Pollock and Gibson on the wings. And then I would actually, I would go with Cody David up top, given an opportunity from the start, see how he goes up against the likes of McGinty and Kildare, depending on who they've got at the back. I think it'll be it's one of those games that's very tough to predict. I mean, Accies are not in good form, neither are their form's pretty much identical to ourselves, other than they've lost one more in their last 5 compared to us, where we drew one. They seem to concede a lot, as we've touched on before. And then going forward, I think that it's an opportunity for really us to make a mark. I know that it's been mentioned a few times by yourselves on the podcast, but it really has to be about Rovers and what we can do as a team, and being able to kick on. Right. Anyway, Alan, Scott, you got any predictions for the game?
Oh, where's my tissue box?
Someone will clip that.
No, I'll go for it's Hamilton again. I think it'll be high scoring. Just to be slightly positive, I'll say that we'll edge it 3-2.
Alan, how about for you?
2-1 Rovers. That's based on nothing really other than just why not.
And Leslie, any more Tombola predictions, or are we all good here?
Yeah, we're all good. We're all good here.
Right.
I'll go for Rovers 4, Hamilton 4.
Is that the fourth one you've just pulled out? The injury time, absolute chaos, come back to 4-4.
Exactly. That's where it's come from.
Rovers against Accies. It's much like our games against Dumbarton. They just always seem to be absolute carnage. So we'll probably be sitting here predicting these scores, and it'll be a 0-0 draw. As ever, pre-match ritual. Should McStay or Should Dargo? Leslie, you've prepared one for us tonight.
Right. Aha. Yes. Okay. We all ready?
No, as ready as we can be.
Not as ready as you were for this podcast, Leslie.
Okay.
So maybe we can do on a snow day.
Aye. Clue 1. 1 lion, 1 wolf, 1 deer, 2 squirrels, and 1 tree. Every club I have had a senior contract with has had a piece of nature in their crest. This is them arranged by order of fierceness.
For goodness sake.
Leslie. Did you drop some LSD before you decided to prepare for this podcast or something?
So,
what's going on?
Loads of blue Smarties.
Aye. So we've got so effectively I've played for every club I've had a professional contract with has had some piece of nature in their crest.
Right. So what are the animals again?
A lion.
Okay.
A wolf.
Is this did you say this is the order they were in as well?
No, this is just the order of the food chain. But it's not the order they played in. So this person has played for clubs that have had a crest with a lion, a wolf, a deer, 2 squirrels, and a tree.
What was the last one?
A tree.
A tree.
All right.
Right.
So they've played for Berwick.
Cheers for that, Scott.
Well, I think it's a ritual now that every week somebody that's played for Berwick is in this. Not a clue. Ewan Murray.
Okay.
Dan Armstrong.
Okay.
We're going for guys who played for Rovers and Kilmarnock here, haven't we?
Pretty much.
Oh.
In fact, I'm just sticking with Dan Armstrong throughout.
I'm not going to lie there. I'm just thinking about the clubs he's played for, and I'm like, that could be it already. Although, I'm not sure about the tree. That's the only one I'm not sure about. He's played for the rest of them.
Dunfermline would have had a tree next to their tower thing, whatever that actually is. CPV house.
The Haunted Mansion.
No going up there.
Alan, any advance from you?
I've got nothing.
Okay, nothing. So, clue 2. The closest ground to where I was born is Exeter City. But I'm eligible for 2 nations who are not England at international level.
What was the end of that? So I got closest to where he was born was Exeter.
But I'm eligible for 2 nations that are not England.
I'm just sticking.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not. I know that Armstrong grew up in Ayr, but I don't know if he was born in Ayr. In terms of other guesses, I think, as Alan said, just when you mention like squirrels, you're like straight away, well, it's somebody that's played for
Kelly.
us and Kelly, like straight away, and then
Ross County's a deer.
Ross County's the deer, and then, well, for Dan Armstrong, the wolf would be wolves.
Right.
But I don't know if there's a wolf in any Scottish teams' badges, but
Nah, but I mean, that's where he's.
I didn't know he was at Wolves.
he
only
came through
player I
he
could,
was in the academy.
the only player I could think of at Rovers and Wolves was Mickey Cameron. But I'm fairly certain he never played for Kilmarnock.
I've no got a guess other than I know that Ewan Murray's not
Unless
going to
this
be
is
the
like-
correct answer, but
exceptional misdirection from Leslie, but I'm sticking with Dan Armstrong.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got nothing still.
Clue 3. I have worn 3 different numbers for Raith Rovers, which add up in total to 75.
Yeah.
I think Robbie's
Dan
still right.
Armstrong. Me and Scott just sitting there like, yeah, makes sense. That's all
Like
right.
it's definitely getting closer to being Dan Armstrong. So
Yeah, funnily enough, that one's not giving me inspiration.
Leslie
so I'm gonna-
inside is either Leslie's either inside going how they got this on clue 1, but also could it end up taking us down a complete different road at one point here.
That's the beauty of this game. And by beauty, I mean abject terror of this game.
All I'll say is just bear in mind that it's not only Scottish clubs that have animals in their badges.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wolves.
Omia Ardia have a squirrel too. Clue 4. My last goal for Raith Rovers was to put us 2-0 up in a game where, unsurprisingly, we ended up drawing 2-2.
Would have been COVID season. Can't remember who it was against, but he was still there.
Rovers put us 2-0 up.
Against Alloa, because he got interviewed after the game and he specifically spoke about how happy, I'm sure he spoke about how happy he was at Rovers. And it's like, oh, that's probably a good sign he's signed a contract, and then he went off elsewhere. Not that I'm better than.
I mean, obviously, there's because it was a part of the season that was it no his free kick that we, but I think we won that day. Did we not win up at Gayfield the season that
We won
Rovers
up
won
at
the league?
Gayfield. Yeah, because that was
I
his
think the
first
goal was
goal.
to put us 2-0 up though. The free kick.
It was, but he left to go to Ross County after that point.
Well, that's why I thought that might have been his last goal. But I was like, no, I think we won that game. I'm still missing other players, by the way, because I also think this is Dan Armstrong. So
I've just got nothing from the clues to actually give me anything. So.
All right. Clue 5 then. I have won the Scottish Championship twice.
Yep, won it with Kelly.
Yep, County and Kelly. Yep.
County.
Next one.
Yep. Next one is
Scott's
John
like, I wanna go to
McGlynn
bed.
signed me twice.
John McGlynn signed him.
I was signed twice by John McGlynn.
Cool.
Yeah, John. Dan Armstrong.
Armstrong.
Fair play, Robbie. Good effort,
It's
mate.
Tony
fair play.
Dingwall.
He's played for there's teams in the Highland League with squirrels and wolves on their badges.
Squirrels, aye.
Yeah.
That
I'll
is
take
indeed
that.
Dan Armstrong.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Good effort.
Thank you very much. Aye. Just
I think the only people that would get that off one that know that his youth career was at Wolves. Like, you wouldn't get it, I don't think, straight away other than that.
I think for me, the badges clue was probably the one that I was like thinking of, like a Wikipedia page of like, right,
aye,
in terms of the animals. If it had started off like my last game was to score in a 2-2 draw, I would be not a clue, not a Scooby, could be anyone. Who's a you clue? Who knows? Anyway,
I mean, to be fair, I would have like Dan Armstrong and Ewan Murray were the two names that came to mind thinking of Rovers and Kilmarnock initially, but it would have been pure guesswork because I didn't know he was at Wolves.
I forgot obviously about the Dunfermline logo, and Robbie mentioned about obviously the trees in it. I went, oh, maybe Ewan Murray is actually in with a shout here. And then I went, no, Hartlepool have got like a shit wheel or something on their badge. So I was like, that's not got a chance.
From their monkey hanging days.
So what was he? What was he's eligible for multiple nations, Les? What was?
He was born in Taunton. He was born in Taunton, and he's eligible for Scotland, but he's also eligible for Ireland. And it was reported recently he's had a conversation with somebody at the FAI about possibly being called up for Ireland.
I remember, was it last season or last season or the season before? Obviously, he was getting sort of almost touted to be like a right wing back for Scotland at one point when obviously Henry was down injured and so was Patterson. But I do remember somebody mentioning that he could potentially also choose Ireland, but I don't think he's even really since then been thought about for either, to be honest.
Fair play to the guys. I mean, he's kicked on. Like when he left us, and he ended up at Kilmarnock. I remember not actually being that bothered because I don't think he was. Towards the end of his time I don't think he was quite as at the level that we kind of knew he could be. And I remember, and he was far from Kilmarnock's best player the year they won the league. I mean, that obviously that game where we got the result down at Rugby Park, he got absolutely skinned for one of the goals, and you thought, oh well, we're better off without him. genuinely did not expect him to kick on in the Premiership as much as he has.
No.
That first season, he didn't really get much of a look in at first under McGuinness, and then it was really after they got promoted, and a good wee bit, that he came into the team and he just kicked on to like a whole new level. That I mean, we'd seen it in glimpses with Rovers, and I was disappointed that he left, because I thought like we had an opportunity at that point to build a really good team. Again, you don't know with the whole McGlynn economics of it, how much of it was built upon like, yeah, we'll offer you this wage, and how, and when you leave, what will actually happen. But yeah,
Bo was probably talking about the fact that, you know, the kind of season he left is when Connolly probably had a really decent season as well. So you're thinking, are we really missing him that much?
Season.
One thing I will say about Danny Armstrong was he, like Dylan Easton, he never hit. You know, he would be having a terrible game, and he'd always show for the ball. He'd always be going over to take the free kick. He'd always be taking the ball. And, you know, that's something we've got with Easton now, and to a lesser extent Lewis Gibson as well. So that was something I always remember about him, was just he was always wanting the ball. He was always showing for the ball.
Yeah.
Also could come into the conversation for cracking free kicks. Did he not score a beauty in his first spell with us?
Yeah, that was one that Scott was on about up at Gayfield. He also had the free kick that, actually, funnily enough, had a huge say in us winning the League One title against Falkirk. I remember quite vigorously celebrating that one in the South Stand as we brought it back from 2-0 down up to 2-0. My pal, who'd not really been to many Rovers games, was like, why are you celebrating that so much? Now, obviously, nobody had heard of COVID at that point, but lo and behold, we win the league based on a points per game basis after finishing a point ahead. Well, if he didn't score that, we don't win the league. So yeah, it's one of those ones where you look back at the contribution, and he did have a lot of moments. I remember going to a game at Local View where he just absolutely you could see he was just light years ahead of anyone else in that squad, in that sort of the season that McGlynn first brought him in. He was just, because at that point I think Vaughan and Henry were both injured. And I think if you looked at that squad in terms of the signings that John McGlynn brought in for that season, if they'd all stayed fit, it might have been a completely different thing. Again, Arbroath had a very, very freakish season where they just never dropped any points. And we kept thinking they're going to slip up at some point. Never happened. But anyway, also an ex-Hamilton youth player. And speaking of Hamilton, that's who we're off to next. So yeah, fingers crossed we will be coming back with a bit more of an optimistic tone after this weekend, after the misery that we've suffered over the last week on this podcast. But yeah, fingers crossed we can travel along to Hamilton, get a result. But thank you for taking the time to listen. As ever, make sure that you do get your predictions in. Leslie, both yourself and myself, we missed out last week, so Duncan's dad has moved back top of the charts. So you've got some work to do to catch up. I've also noticed that Blair Hopcroft, he's going silently strong. I don't know if he's flying under the radar there, but he's making a good effort of it, catching up to you. So what are your thoughts on that, Les?
Well, I'm just need to try and get my prediction in. Actually, completely didn't get one in last week because I was KO'd, but I need to try and get some ground back to the top of the leaderboard.
In fairness, I'd have been as well not putting one in last week.
Well, there we are. Well, we will be back on Sunday, or potentially Monday, depending on how things work out. That's what we know. But thank you for taking the time to listen, and bye for now. And bye, Bob.
And bye, Bob.
Hey, Bob.